Dear Mr. Einar Guðfinnsson, Speaker of the Parliament of Iceland, thank you for the honor of joining us at the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy here in Berlin and for your lecture and discussions with us today. We would like to ask you a few questions in order to hear your thoughts and opinions on some very important issues. What could be the role of cultural diplomacy with regards to the building of a world without walls?
I think it plays a major role. I mean, cultural diplomacy, where you work across borders in order to facilitate new ideas, facilitating things which could be beneficial to some countries. And I think it's of utmost importance that people know the culture of each other. When we talk about culture in that context, we are defining it broadly, referring to the experience, the history of nations.
I see. In your opinion, can cultural diplomacy help facilitate a peace-building process nowadays?
Definitely, and we have seen a number of incidences where that has actually taken place. Iceland is a peaceful nation, unarmed, peaceful nation, and our diplomatic resources are used for those purposes. We're a small nation. We are aware of that our impact on the development of the world is limited for those reasons. However, we perceive ourselves as an important player on the international scene as well. We are of the opinion that our culture, our history, is something which can be beneficial for other countries to learn from. So we are eager to participate in advancing the ideals which are held so closely by the general public. However, we also realize that it is of particular importance for small countries to participate with others in close cooperation. Our closest allies and friends are, of course, the Nordic countries, Scandinavian countries, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Norway, and others. And we have also worked more closely with the Baltic states. And through that channels, we have been able to make an influence. And for smaller countries, it is of utmost importance to participate with others, forming a group. Of course, this applies to other participation, like we are founding members of NATO, and we have been in the United Nations. We are not members of the European Union, but on the other hand, we work very closely with them through the European Economic Area cooperation. So, although being a small nation, we work actively on the international scene.
I say, regarding to the previous lecture you had today, what role did cultural diplomacy play in 1989 during the fall of the Berlin Wall?
It definitely played an important role, but from my point of view, there were maybe two major reasons for the fall of the wall and to the fall of communism. It was a collapse of an ideology. Basically, what happened at that time was an expression of a collapse of an ideology. What I tried to argue in my lecture was that there were two reasons for the fall of the communist states, including the old Soviet Union. Firstly, it was the central planned economy couldn't prevail. The countries which were subject to the central planning all became more backward. They didn't progress, they didn't advance. So people eventually discovered that this was not the way of improving their living standards. So that, of course, increased the level of discontent within these countries. Secondly, I mean, in order to advance a central planned economy, there has to be a level of despotism and strict measures taken by the authorities which eventually were something people couldn't bear anymore. So these were actually the root causes of the fall of these societies. But cultural diplomacy, however, played a major role because I mean people went to the streets and protested and they got information from other countries. So cultural diplomacy played a role there.
Yeah, because my next question was that in addition to these two main reasons that you have mentioned, do you think that the exchange of different cultures and visions of the world did somehow affect those events in 1989?
Definitely, and I think people got more access to daily life outside these close societies. I refer to Andrei Amalrik, the Soviet dissident who wrote in 1970 a very influential book called Will the Soviet Union Survive Until 1984? And what he argued was that these societies were based on isolation of each social group from each other, isolation of these countries, and this isolation was broken because people got access to information from other countries. They could compare their own societies to the open societies in the West, where the living standard had improved and people enjoyed political and social freedom. I think this has become even more accessible now through the social media, telecommunication and so on and so forth. The access of information is now more easily obtainable than ever before.
I see. Now the Academy for Cultural Diplomacy organizes a number of international conferences bringing together individuals from very diverse backgrounds and enables intercultural dialogue. How can cultural diplomacy help to build trust and allow discussion on global key issues such as sustainable development and economics?
I mean, bringing together people from all over the world to discuss these things is of course an expression of cultural diplomacy, and so that definitely plays a role. I have a great experience in that myself. I worked very actively within the Interparliamentary Union for a long time, and which made it more accessible for me to learn about the cultures, the history of other nations, probably and hopefully at least making it more understandable to me, the role of how religion, history, politics play in forming different societies. So I think this kind of, you can call it diplomacy, political cooperation is of course of enormous importance.
I see, you've mentioned the Interparliamentary Alliance, and the Interparliamentary Alliance for Human Rights and Global Peace has been established to raise awareness of the...
No, I was referring to the Interparliamentary Union, which is an organization over 100 years old, which has been, which is a forum for parliaments all over the world. From our point of view, that is a very important forum because I mean the executive power of nations have ample opportunities to discuss among themselves, but parliamentarians from the whole globe, from the whole world, do not have not many opportunities or forums for such discussions. So from my point of view, that is of utmost importance. And I think Parliament should play a big role in formulating and discussing on that international level.
I see this point, but how important do you see the role of international law in assuring the development and implementation of human rights at a global level?
International law, of course, play a major role, and that is particularly important for small societies, vulnerable societies. International law can be of greatest importance. Of course, one must make one reservation. I mean, international law should not interfere directly with the ability of legislators in democratic societies to formulate their own policy or their own legislation.
I see, but in order to implement that, what is your opinion on the contribution of cultural diplomacy in this regard?
This is of course also of importance, because that of the experience from one country then makes an impact on legislation in another country, and that is very apparent. I mean, this is of course apparent in Europe, where legislation from one country makes an impact on another one. We have all kinds of international treaties, such on human rights, on law of the sea, which is very applicable to Iceland, and Iceland played a role in formulating that. And so I think even small nations like ours, of only 300,000 people, can make an impact if we act actively in the formulation of such legislation.
Yeah, I see this. And related to that, the ICT Organization for Youth Education and Development is dedicated to the initiation, promotion and execution of education and development program for the youth. In your opinion, how important is political participation for youth empowerment?
It is the participation of the youth in political life is of course important, because they will be the ones who will be the future politicians. It is a matter of concern that we see that political participation, traditional, should we say, political participation of the younger generation has declined in the recent years in most countries. But on the other hand, we can also look at it from another context. Political interest of youth is probably not declining, but the traditional political parties have not been seen as attractive to the younger generation. They have other accesses to make an impact in political life and political discussion.
I see. But you as a high-ranking politician, how do you see the relation and communication between the youth and political leaders in the future, both in your country and in the world?
Well, I think this is something which we, the older generation, have to acknowledge, that we have not been able to reach out in the same way as people did a few decades ago towards the younger generation. It's probably something we need to re-evaluate, and how we can do that. I mean, different forms are more suitable to the younger generation than the form which was suitable for my generation. Political parties are not the wagons they used to be for people to jump on if they want to participate in political life. There are other means of doing that now in the age of social media and so on and so forth. Right.
But right now, to which extent is Icelandic youth involved in its country's politics?
I mean, all political parties have youth movements. My impression is that they are not as active as they used to be. And as I said earlier, it seems to be apparent that the youth's political participation takes place on a different level, in a different forum than it used to be, and politicians and political parties need to adapt to that.
I see. Thank you so much, sir. Look forward to have you here again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your giving me the opportunity to have this discussion. Thank you.
It's our pleasure.